are as live as it's going to get. So, Johnversation podcast, episode number 9. My guest today. So you have a whole lot of initials behind your name.
A lot.
I will not lie. I Googled them to see if I could figure out exactly what all of them meant. But the only thing I think I was able to figure out, and definitely tell me if I'm wrong, but we have Miss Morgan Bryant, or Mrs. Morgan Bryant, and you are a nurse practitioner board certified. Is that right? That's what the BC stands for, right?
You got the BC. Good job.
Okay. And then I know the NP is nurse practitioner, but for people who are checking out the show and want to know, your official title, would you mind kind of laying that official title down on the anyone who's listening?
Oh, yeah. So I don't really use these initials much yet. They are still new to me, but my official title would be AG-ACNP, BC, and that just means adult-gerontology acute care nurse practitioner. And if you just want to break down the alphabet soup a little bit, that pretty just means taking care of anybody that's 17 years or older, primarily in a hospital setting.
Okay, so you don't introduce yourself that way to people? You're not like, hey, I'm Morgan Bryant, and here's the entire alphabet, BC?
Right, no, I haven't gotten there yet, but it's still new to me, so maybe I'll, bump up my pretentious a little bit.
You should, definitely. You should get like a giant name tag and wear it everywhere you
go.
The
name tag has to be like 14 inches long.
Well, so how many years did you go to school for that set of letters?
For that particular set of letters, it was only 2.5 years. I say only just because could have been longer if I had gone for my doctorate, but I just did the master's level right now. So 2.5 years altogether.
Oh, only a master's.
Right, yeah.
So
just a master's, not a doctor.
What about before you went for your master's? How many years of school before that? Because we're at 2.5, like, so total.
Total, I believe I'm sitting around 7.5 years of higher education.
Okay, yeah. So you definitely deserve to have. You should make a T-shirt
that
says Morgan Bryant, and then on the back is the definition.
All the.
Yeah, it's I am nothing if not braggadocious. So I would definitely just be like, yeah, this is every shirt that I have. Says I have in 30 different colors, but it all says the same thing.
Exactly.
Well, I wanted to bring you on. Obviously with, what you do for a living and spending all your time in the hospital right now. And I've told you this just in our conversations, but I definitely look at you right now as like a real life superhero. And I know that you have vehemently disagreed with me when I've told you that, but I mean that. I think, people in your field and people that are going into work every day and taking care of the people that are sick, especially right now, you deserve a whole lot of recognition, a whole lot of praise. And you really are. You guys are wearing masks and everything. You're like straight up superhero right now. So, and I also want to say
thank you.
No, it's my thank you. I deserve no thanks. I've been staying home, not doing anything. So, I also wanted to say thank you because you are our very first remote guest. So we've been off for a while, been trying to figure out how we're going to continue to do the show when I can't have anybody actually come in and sit down. So, finally figured that out. So I appreciate you being the first guest. And, I want to start off by asking you, so, before we kind of jump into you and what your life looks like right now, I kind of wanted to ask you, what are some of the things that you're doing when you're home right now, and especially with what you're dealing with, every day when you go to work, what are some of the things that you are doing to stay sane in this crazy time of, quarantine and all that stuff?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I think a lot of people can benefit from this because I think a lot of us are staying home, or at least supposed to be. But I'm a crafty, creative person at heart. So anytime I have a day off, I'm trying to spend my time either, painting or sewing or knitting. But I've also started a garden, which is a good excuse to simply just be outside without endangering myself or others, but I'm still able to interact with nature and see what's going on in my neighborhood. So I've spent a lot of time outside. We're still allowed to exercise. So we're going to walking the dogs lots of evenings, especially because it's warming up and it's getting prettier. So definitely recommend kind of getting outside of the walls of your house, but in the safest way possible.
Yeah, we've been doing a lot of that too. And I will attest to your knitting skills because you have made me, I don't know if you remember this, but you did make me, I'm a cigarette smoker, which is not the best right now, but you did make me a koozie for my, you knitted me a koozie that just fit my package, my box of cigarettes perfectly. So you definitely have, that's one of the most interesting like knitting gifts and very unique. I feel very lucky that I was the recipient. It's in a box. We still have it because that was back when we were living in Murfreesboro, and so we still have it. I gotta unpack it out of the box somewhere. I think I took it to work with me a couple times, and people were like, "Whoa!" I was like, "Hey, you like that?" Let me just, they're nice and warm.
That's like 5 or 6 years ago. Hopefully, my skills have elevated just a little bit since then.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I know what you're saying. Like, with the kid, we got right before she was born, we got a little. It's like a slide and a swing, like a little Fisher Price thing, and she's been too small up until this year to be able to sit in the swing and slide down. So it's just been sitting in the backyard, and we Lysoled it down, sprayed it, got it all clean so that she could finally use it. And I felt so bad for Kara because she spent all this time cleaning it, and she played on it, and the next day she came out and the birds had like shit all over the slide. So she was like, damn it, I have to clean it again. But yeah, so it's great for her naps too, because she's just running across the yard like back and forth, and now she just collapses. Like she'll get up on the couch and be like, good night, and just fall asleep. So
that's actually what I'm doing with my husband Zach too. I bought him a little slide so that it wears him out.
Oh, did I lose you?
Nope, still here.
You cut out just a little bit. Tell me, what were you doing for Zach?
Oh, I also got him a little baby slide so it wears him down too, so that he's tired at nighttime.
Now, a lot we've known, Kara and I have known, Kara's known you forever, and I've known you since I've moved to Tennessee. But for those who may not know you who are listening, Zach is the most quiet person on the planet. So I imagine him just going down the slide with his arms up, but like no emotion on his face. He's
the most monotone face you can think of.
Just like, oh, this is a great ride. I'm having such an awesome time. So, now, do you guys still have the chickens?
Yes, we have 2 chickens. They've kind of dwindled because we've had them for 7 years now. So we're only down to 2, and we're in the process of talking about when would we reload the chickens. So is that this year in this house, or wait until we have a little bit more space for them?
Okay. Now, how many, and this has nothing to do with why I wanted to have you on the show today, but I was just curious. So with 2 chickens, like how many eggs do you get in a week? Because depending on how this coronavirus thing goes, I was telling Kara, like, we may need to get some chickens and like a goat, some stuff like that. So like how many, with 2 chickens, how many eggs do you get per week, would you say?
Well, theoretically, if they were a little bit younger, you'd get 1 egg per chicken per day. Since mine are a little older, I'm just getting 1 a day. And I think it's just 1 chicken that's still laying, and the other one is just too old now. But the last time we went to pick up food for them, the guys at Tractor Supply were saying that the chicks are getting bought up. And I think that's because people have that same thought process of, oh, what if we don't have food in 6 months from now?
Yeah, just buying a bunch of guns and a bunch of chickens.
Exactly.
And then when they get too old to lay eggs, one problem takes care of the other. So
exactly. It's hard work, but you can still eat your own chickens.
Yeah, well, me personally, I think I would definitely have a problem with that. I think I would get emotionally attached and be like, I can't, like I've had you since you were a little baby. You know what I mean? I don't understand. Farm living is not for me. I will say that. However, if I just could go out and be like, because I remember, right when everything started happening, Kara has been making fun of me because I'm grocery shopping like religiously, like making sure that like I'm like, oh, I got to run out and grab this because I don't have it. It's like every time I go, I come back with way more than she asked for.
Oh, yeah.
And I went and there was like no eggs. And I was like, damn it, we need chickens. Like I can't. Now it seems like it's back to normal. Like, you can't find toilet paper, but there's eggs and milk and all that stuff. So
exactly.
Well, I'm glad that you are finding ways to, you know, kind of finding ways to deal with it. Like I said, you know, it's stressful for everybody right now, but especially with, you know, what you do for work and things like that, like it's got to have like an added level of stress to it that I think a lot of people wouldn't be able to understand. So before we get to that point, you know, I kind of wanted to ask you, you know, because I've known you, I've lived here 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I've known you since before I actually moved down here, because I used to come visit, you know, Kara and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
I met, you know, you and Zach. And I mean, it's got to be coming up on, I would say probably 8 years. So I mean, I've known you quite a long time, but I've always been a little bit curious as to what like little kid Morgan was like. So like when you were growing up, like what were some of the things that you were into? Kind of describe yourself as a kid, because I imagine you having like this big imagination and kind of being like just like a goofy kid, because I know you as an adult, and those are and when I say goofy, I definitely don't mean like, oh, that chick over there, she's goofy, but I mean, you know, you're like
I mean, I
silly.
also was that too.
But you know, as I've known you as an adult, like you're fun to be around. You know, we've always like anytime we've done anything, I've always had a lot of fun and hanging out with you and Zach. I mean, you guys are two of my favorite people, hands down. So you know, talk to me a little bit about what it was like for you growing up. What kind of kid were you?
Yeah. Well, I come from a blended family. My dad and stepmom got married when just right before I started kindergarten. And my stepmom had two kids that were the exact same age as me and my younger sister. So it's four kids in the span of 3 years. So our house was loud and crazy, and lots of, you know, working out the kinks of what a blended family was like. So I think as a kid, I was probably the nerdy one for sure, but I was still just friends with everybody. I felt like I intermingled in a lot of groups instead of having my own group. I loved SpongeBob, loved Harry Potter. We were always outside, just being in the suburban area of Nashville. It kind of felt like we were still kind of in the country area. My family has a little bit of land, so we were just outside, always playing in the dirt, playing basketball. Just, I feel like I was a goofy one, but I still do find time to be like the leader, because I was the oldest of four kids and trying to find my way in that weird blended family area, I guess you would say.
Yeah, well, I will tell you, you know, I'm the oldest of four, so I know,
Yeah.
you know, definitely about like a lot, and we're all a year apart, except for my youngest sister. Her and I were 7 years apart. But I definitely get what you're saying with like, there's the loudness. There's all like, you know, if my sister and brother weren't fighting, then like me and my brother and me and my sister were fighting, and that was back in like landline days. So it's, you know, everybody had a boyfriend, girlfriend. So it was like, get off the phone. And I, you know, it's gotta be, you know, I can only imagine kind of being like, you know, growing up just the, you know, or, you know, starting off with you and your sister, and then like, boom, you've got two other siblings. So I can imagine that would definitely be an adjustment. Anytime you talk about your younger sister, the only thing that I can think of is when I forget where we were somewhere, but we bumped into her and she had some adult beverages, and she was like, don't tell Morgan, please don't tell Morgan. And I was like, is that, I asked Kara, I was like, is that Morgan's sister? She's like, yep, she's having a good time. She's in a good mood today.
Oh yeah,
So,
I think all three of my siblings are definitely way cooler than I am. And I think I partied just a little bit less than they did. So they think like their partying has to be a secret, and sometimes they party without me. But as I've gotten older, it's like, okay, Morgan is semi cool now that she's getting a little bit older.
Well, we've partied. I mean, we've been to Orange Beach, and you know, I mean, I've seen you with a couple. That was back when I was drinking the Red's apple ales. Dude, I drink like 8 of those. Oh man, there's so much sugar in those. It's so bad.
That is such
But
a bellyache waiting to happen.
like I would feel great when I was drinking, and then well, not even the next day, like 3 hours later, I'd be like, why did I do this to myself? And then the next day was even worse. But when we're on vacation, I figured out that if you just drink more, then that goes away, and then you feel great. So
Yep.
So kids, if you're listening, that's the secret. So
just keep chugging along.
Right. Yeah. Just keep tipping them back. So let me ask you, when did you find your, did you always feel like you wanted to be in a profession where you were helping other people, or, I mean, did you think, nursing, doctor path, stuff like early on, or was that something that kind of developed? What were you thinking originally?
I think if I'm recalling correctly, as a little kid, elementary school age, I always said I was going to be a teacher. When we were playing house or school with my siblings, I always was a teacher. So I think that translated into just what I thought would be a good career path. But around middle school is when I was saying that, oh, when I grow up, I'm going to be a brain surgeon. And I had kind of leveled it off to be, well, I can't be a cardiac surgeon because if I mess up, like their heart will stop and they'll die. But if I mess up their brain, like they'll just
no pressure.
be kind of dumb. Yeah, right. If I mess up their brain, like they'll just be a little bit dumber. And so I kind of ran with that for a little while. But and then again, I was like a nerdy one. I always made straight A's. So I was like, well, I'm smart enough to be a doctor. But when I got to about junior year of high school, I was like, med school's probably not in the cards. But what's pretty close, that still requires a lot of intelligence, but also can kind of dip into some of my other characteristics. And that's kind of how I landed in nursing.
Okay. Now, when you say like med school wasn't in the cards, was it like just like, like, man, that's a lot of money and I don't want to spend that kind of money? Or, I mean, what was it for you that was like, this isn't in the cards?
Well, one, obviously finances were a big deal, but again, I think I was in calculus in like 10th grade in high school. I was really just advanced in maths and sciences. Then I got my first B in calculus. So I think I just kind of like, stepped myself back, even though hindsight's 20/20. It's like, heck yeah, you were taking a senior level class as a 14-year-old. But I think I just kind of got in my head a little bit, and as you get older, you do get to see like the realities of, oh, med school means 4 years of undergrad plus 4 years of med school plus 4 years of residency, and your life doesn't start until, you're in your late 20s, early 30s. And I think that was also a hindrance for me, just because I was ready to get out there, buy a house, be a grown up. And I thought that med school would kind of slow that down a little bit. But also getting to see like the difference. There is like a different model between medicine theory and nursing theory. Same things as a whole, but the way that people go about it from the medicine route and the nursing route, nursing has a little bit more caring and holistic, whereas medicine is very sciencey and cause and effecty. So I felt like the nursing path, more as I got older, was definitely my speed, because I was able to passionately care and get hands involved in taking care of people.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that, because I think especially when you're younger, like when I was a little kid, I was like, oh, like doctors are the ones who take care of sick people. It's it's the doctor that makes people better. But then as you get older and you start like, you've got to go to the hospital for things, or just going for like a doctor's visit, like you spend way more time with the nurse than you actually do with the doctor. And I think the best example for me is when our daughter was born, the nurse was in with my wife, like was in with Kara, like pushing for hours and hours and hours. And then it was time for the baby to be born, and the doctor just came and said, get out of the way, and was like, hut, 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 and then caught it. And
right.
So I was like, man, like you're taking the glory. It really put it in perspective for me that like you're hopping in here and taking the credit, but this woman is the one who, spent all of that time. I mean, literally it was like hours and hours and hours. And we actually, my mother-in-law got that nurse flowers afterward, because she was just so, so nice. And we just couldn't have asked for a better nurse. I think we got very, very lucky, but it's just, and I just don't think that, I don't think a lot of people realize that when it comes to nursing, it seems like you have just the same amount of responsibility, or if not more, than a lot of these doctors do. And I know that you had mentioned kind of holistically, kind of taking care of people in a whole. Tell me a little bit more about what you mean by that, right? So, because I think a lot of people are like, nurses come in, check vitals, whatever, but you're talking about taking care of the person, not just talking about medicine and things like that. So, talk to me a little bit about what your thought process is there.
Yeah, I mean, we do learn like a holistic way of care in nursing school. And that just means like incorporating people not only physically, but mentally and spiritually, emotionally, because when you are as a doctor in the hospital, that's when you're at your most vulnerable. So there's a lot of people seeing you naked and you don't know these people, and that's really strange. Or sometimes you're going to the bathroom in ways that you're not used to, or you're doing things you're not meaning to, or you're not able to do things that you want to do. So it's one thing if I can't move my arm, it's one thing for me to physically help you move your arm. That's another thing for me to help you deal with the fact that you can't move your arm right now. And what does that look like for you mentally and psychologically? What does that mean for you? In your day-to-day life, how can we find hacks for you to deal with you not being able to mobilize your arm? And then, the spiritual aspect of people either, really cling to whatever faith they have, or their faith kind of dissipates when they're in areas of crises. So, we just have to support that people, want to cling onto that, and how can we incorporate your spiritual aspect also into this care? So you really have to look at it from a bunch of different angles, because for that moment, I am your home and I'm the one that's taking care of you for the days or weeks that you're in the hospital. And I don't want it to be a negative experience. So we just all, try our hardest to take something negative and turn it into the most positive that we can.
Yeah. And I mean, I really think that that's a gift that you have that mindset, just because, I've been, so I didn't think I was going to talk about this on the show, and like, we're friends, so that, you're aware, but for those listening, part of the reason we didn't do a show for a while is I had a cancer scare, and they needed to do a bladder scope. And so the first time I went, and I'm not going to say like where I went or anything like that, but the nurse that was there, she was just very kind of like, okay, well, what's wrong with you? You know what I mean? Like very like to the point. There wasn't a lot of compassion. And in my head, I was kind of, freaking out a little bit. So I think exactly what you're saying, where that, that like that compassion and kind of help in dealing with people in those scary moments, things like that go a very long way. Cause I know in that moment, that's definitely something that I could have used. Cause I was like, oh, I mean, you're just used to giving people bad news or dealing with this every day, but this is like hit the brakes on life for me. And then when you mentioned seeing people naked, the only thing that I could think is when I had to do that scope, because they, they're like, go in there, and they just flipped it up, and my business was out for everybody. And when they, for those who don't know, when you have to get a scope like that, they go in through your parts to your bladder, and she had to numb it up with lidocaine, but they just squirt that sucker on in there and she's like, it's gonna burn a little bit, and she put that in there. I was like, oh, you fucking bitch. And I was like, oh my god, I'm so sorry. So like I could like, and when I left, I was like, man, I'm sure that woman has been called like every name in the book, because that is not like, it's just like an emotional reaction. So I'm sure, and just some of the stories that you've told us, when we've been just kind of like sitting around and hanging out, like I'm sure that you are with people in some of like the most vulnerable moments they have. What is it like for you in those vulnerable moments, like how are you able to empathize or relate, or what is the tactic that you may take in that moment to kind of be able to put yourself in their shoes, or like how do you make that connection?
Yeah, I mean, again, these vulnerable moments can happen as something as simple as, a catheter placement, which is still extremely vulnerable, very personal. So I think you just have to take it with the grace and also kind of reassure people that, this is very personal to you, but it's business to me because, just parts are parts and I'm just here to get that urine out of your bladder. But then, it also gives...
You're not like, damn, Jeffrey.
Oh,
somebody's been working out.
Yeah, no, and again, like, you see all shapes and sizes, and they teach us in middle school that we're all built differently, and you see all the different things, and sometimes you see things that you're not expecting, and you just have to, again, be graceful and, conserve whatever thoughts you have and not let it show on your face at all, because that person is just spread out for all to see. And I think I can only just imagine what's going on in that person's head, or what would be going on in my head if I were in that position. So I just, keep it business as usual. But then again, we see people in even more extremes of, death and dying, or, dealing with a lifelong newfound disability. So I think you have to, use your experiences. I've seen hundreds of people die in my nursing career. So every single time, I just think, one, this person is dying, and that's scary and sad. But also you have to think about the family, that this is, this is business for me, but this is how they're going to remember their loved one's last days. And so you just have to constantly change your perspective of, what does it feel like to be in the bed? What does it feel like to be that person's wife or husband or daughter or brother? And just constantly put yourself in their shoes without getting horribly emotionally invested, because it's a little bit awkward when your nurse is more emotional than your family member is in those kinds of times. So, try to take a step back, and at the same time be in it. And that's kind of a hard balance to find, but it comes with experience for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess that's something I never thought about too, is that, especially if it's someone who is in there and they know they're not going home and you're spending a lot of time with them. I can imagine, I mean, especially for someone like you in my experience, because, when we first met, like I remember like you gave me just a big hug and like, I've heard so much about you. It's so nice to meet you. And you were just very warm and open. And Zach was like, hey,
Yes.
But you, kind of thinking about your personality, I'm sure it's very easy to, get connected to some of these folks and things like that.
Yeah.
And I guess I've never really thought of, hey, I've got to like kind of monitor my emotion so I can't be, more upset than the family. That's nothing that would have ever even, crossed my mind, Now I know that you had mentioned, unfortunately it's part of the job, but you've, been there when a lot of people have passed away. Is that something that, going into this profession, is that something that, you would kind of prepared yourself for, or does it come with, and I'm definitely not to like sound like callous or anything, but I imagine that, for me, like the first few would be very hard, but by the time you get to like 50 or 60, you're just like, well, gotta keep working on the folks that are still here. So, was that something that was a hurdle for you, or is that, again, something that you had kind of thought about going into the job?
Yeah, I think that I did kind of have that perspective already before I became a nurse, just because I did have, a couple of traumatic childhood moments. My mom passed away when I was really young, and my dad's best friend's wife, who, kind of loved on us after my mom had passed away. She passed away probably 3 or 4 years later. So I'd had experience with death, and I probably had a more morbid experience just at the very beginning of like, oh crap, people are going to die. And, I'm just going to have to be the tough one that deals with it. But, my first code ever was on Christmas of 2015. So it's my first Christmas without being at my, with my family. And then this guy had actually been with us for a few weeks. We're planning on sending him to like a rehab facility as soon as the holidays were done and, business hours were back in action. And it just happened so suddenly. And I was so connected to this guy. I was on a first name basis with him, and it tore me apart. And I just remember one of my peers, he's such a good guy and we're so different, but he just like grabbed me by the shoulders and said, why don't you go into the break room and cry for just a minute and then come back and do the work. And so, fast forwarding 5 years, I did that, a month or so ago with a new nurse, and it was her first one. It was very unexpected. We had told the daughter of the patient, just go downstairs and get some coffee before shift change. He's fine. We're going to help him, eat breakfast. And then, in the middle of breakfast, his heart just stopped randomly. And that sweet nurse was just torn to pieces. And, I just got to be back in my buddy's shoes, and I grabbed her by the shoulder and said, go into the linen closet, cry for just a second. You cannot be more emotional than his daughter, and she's going to be very much surprised about this news. So, it is okay to be emotional, but also, like you said, your heart hardens a little bit over time, and you still do get connected to people. But I think it's just like an emotional distance you have to keep. Again, because if you took every single one to heart, nurses would go crazy. So, I had a hard time finding that distance at the beginning. And now, I'm still able to inwardly say, this was a life, this was a family member, this is important. But also, if you think about it way too much, you get spiraled into a deep depression, because the truth of the matter is we're all born and we're all going to pass away eventually. So you can't get too much in your head, or that's all you'll think about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, obviously I knew about your mom passing just, from being friends. And, I will say, I don't think I've made that connection, because, Kara has talked to me before, and she's, how are you going to feel when this happens or that happens? And, we've kind of had the discussion that like, I've never had anyone, that I've been super close with. Like my grandfather passed away last year, and, I loved him, but there was nothing that we ever really like had to bond over. He was, Mr. Fix-It kind of stuff like that. I'm more like artistic and have been, nerdy. I remember when I was kids, he was really into computers. So I think we had that like when I was a kid, but he more connected with like my brother. Him and my sister were really close, but we didn't just have that kind of connection. And then I've had like my great grandmother has passed away. So I've never had anyone that I've been, really close with or really connected with, pass on me or anything like that. And whereas Kara, she's in the opposite situation. So, when I think about that, I'm like, man, I don't know. Cause if it was somebody that I really cared about, I think I would be just an emotional wreck. And I don't think I'm the right kind of person to do what you do, because I would, like every person, I'd be in the broom closet or the linen closet, every single time for like 25 minutes at a time. But I mean, when I think about it too, like I really do think it takes a person who is very strong in spirit, and someone, that's the one thing about you too, is that I've seen you like upset or like frustrated by things, but I've never seen you or thought of you as the kind of person that's like, I'm going to dwell in this. Like, I'm upset. And so it's just, you know what I mean? Like you seem like someone who's very resilient. And if something happens, okay, like how do I figure it out? How do I be an adult? Things like that. And when I think of nurses, I kind of, I think about like, police officers or firefighters. I mean, they've all seen terrible things and seen people pass, but it seems like it's a very specific kind of person who can tackle those kind of responsibilities. And I think with the show, I've had you on, I've had 911 dispatchers, therapists, things like
Mm.
that. And I think the more that I talk to people with that mindset, I realize that this is why I am doing this and not doing that, because I'm not cut out for it.
Yeah, I mean, but nursing is cool in the sense that, you and I are so different, but there's also so many levels of nursing where, you can be the person that's at the urology office that does the scopes all day. And you don't have to tap into that as much as you would on a pediatric hospice hospital. Oh yeah.
That's what I asked her. I was like, so how many of these do you do a day? Because that's a lot of wieners. You're looking at a lot of wieners every day. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's a good. I mean, I could be the bedpan guy probably, because that stuff doesn't gross me out. I could just go around and be like, dump, dump, dump. Here's a new one. But if it was like getting to know people and things like that, like I get attached very quickly as it is. And so, I mean, I would be the one where like the family would, be crying, and I would just be like, more tissue. So like, he was such a good person.
Yeah.
I don't think I could do it. But yeah, I had something I wanted to ask you, and I just lost it because I was picturing myself crying like a 4-year-old.
Picturing all those wieners as being the wiener nurse.
Right, that's John Connor, wiener nurse. That sounds like a Lifetime show. I'm down.
We're gonna
for
put that
one.
on your lab coat.
Dr. Pimple Popper. Yeah, I'll be on right after Dr. Pimple Popper, and then the wiener nurse. That's all I'm doing is looking at wieners. So let me ask you this, because I mean, you've been, I know like you've been going to school and furthering your education, but you've been in the hospital, for what, 5 years now, if not more than that?
Yeah, I actually got my first hospital job in 2013 as like a nursing assistant. So going up on 6.5 years right now.
Okay. Well, because you had mentioned like you got to be there for that person who had their first code, and kind of be the mirror to yourself in that first situation for you. I mean, talk to me a little bit about that, because I can imagine, being someone who, excuse me, being someone who is, been there for the years that you have. And I'm sure that, every year there's new people coming in and things like that. What is that relationship like? Like, do you see yourself in some of those folks coming in, or, I mean, what is it like kind of being a veteran and being able to kind of push people? Like, talk to me a little bit about that dynamic.
Yeah. Nursing is just a really high turnover profession. And I think it is because burnout happens so quickly, emotionally and physically. We're moving a lot of weight with people constantly. That's the physical aspect, but also we're working 12 hours a day on our feet all the time. And then the emotional aspect of when people are passing away, and, how do I juggle, 6 patients' emotional health on top of their physical health. So in nursing school, one of my favorite professors said, you haven't even graduated yet, but 6 months from now, you're going to be in charge. I said, are you crazy? Like, I cannot be in charge. Like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And she was exactly right that I was a charge nurse almost 6 months after getting my first job. And that's simply because of the turnover. I looked around and, the experienced nurses weren't there anymore. They had moved on to day shift or outpatient settings, or they had retired. So you just have to kind of grow up really fast, and you learn really fast. So I've definitely been a leader for quite some time, but I absolutely love new nurses because they're fresh slates, and they're bringing things. The great thing about living in Nashville is everyone wants to move here, which is a good and bad thing. But for nursing, I have coworkers from California and Michigan and Connecticut, random places
Shout
from
out
around
Tom
the world.
Rich.
Hello.
Hello, Tom
Hey,
Rich.
Tom. Yeah.
Tommy. Yeah, that's
so,
crazy.
John and I have a mutual friend that John grew up with as a kid that I currently work with now, and all the way from Michigan down to Nash.
Plymouth Canton's finest, Tom Rich. So
Tom.
that's what was crazy when I found out he lived in Nashville, and then it was even crazier when I found out, because like we've known each other since like middle school and we hadn't talked in years, and then he messaged me. He was like, "You're living in Nashville now?" I was like, "Yeah." And then I was talking to you, and you were like, "Hey, I know a guy who knows you." And I was like, "This is just the smallest world
Yeah,
ever."
the world is
But
small.
yeah, I'm sorry, I
But
didn't mean to interrupt you.
no, not at all. It's fun. Like the new nurses are fun, and I've been able to become really good friends with people who, I precepted long ago that I had to teach the ropes. It is a little funnier now that I'm getting a little older. So I'm 28, and the new nurses coming in are 20 to 23 years old. So it's not like they invite me to their parties anymore, but they still look to me, and a lot of it is truly we make things up on the fly. And that's the joy of being a nurse, is that you are challenged to be creative. So sometimes you just make things up and they're like, "Oh my God, Morgan's the nicest and smartest person in the whole wide world." Really, I just made that up. I pulled it out of my butt. So I really do enjoy hanging out with the young kids. And, I tell them all the time, we all have the same Tennessee registered nurse license. So, my word is not any better than yours, but I do have 5 years behind my name. So this is what I've done in the past. Take with it what you will, kind of thing.
Well, and I think that's good, because it definitely feels like and correct me if I'm wrong, but it definitely feels like a profession where you're in a lot of very fast-paced situations. And so you've got to be able to say, like, "Hey, I made this decision. This is why I made this decision." And like, I don't need to go talk to 3 other people to kind of validate, "Hey, is this the right decision to be made?" Because I can definitely see, like, if someone's on the crash cart, I think that's what it's called, right?
You got
I've
it.
seen like an episode or two of Grey's Anatomy, but if like
There
somebody's
you
on the
go.
crash cart, you're not going to be like, "Oh, hey, Morgan, I've only been here, a year, and you've been here 5 years. Like, what would you do?" It's like, I got to make the decision. Is
Yeah.
that right? Or is it, I just, like I said, I've seen like 2 episodes of Grey's Anatomy, so I don't know. I've seen a lot of Scrubs, but I haven't seen.
Yeah, for sure. Well, the media has misconceptualized some of this in the sense that doctors do like all of the, med passes, and you hardly ever see a nurse on Grey's. And if you do, they're getting yelled at. But, it really is a team effort. But a lot of things that people don't realize is that nurses, have a lot of leeway, but they can't really make a decision without a doctor. So the crash cart, I don't need a doctor to be there, but I have a protocol. I'm just not making this stuff up. And that's kind of like where your critical thinking comes to play, because we are using medications that can legitimately keep someone alive or kill them. So you have to definitely be on top of, hey, I didn't order this medicine. This isn't my fault, but I have the power to choose, is it appropriate to give this medication now or not? So again, just, you have to trust your gut sometimes, but also just think critically and just think about, why am I doing this, and what's the result going to be, and do I want that result right now? So it does take just a little bit of thought, and a lot of, background knowledge of, medications and cause and effect kind of sort of thing. A little pathophysiology, which just means what is going on in the body, why, how are your lungs and your heart connected, and how is this heart medicine going to affect your lungs, sort of thing. So you got to just go on some basic knowledge, and some common sense is a really big part of nursing.
So how often do you say stat every day? Do you say stat like a whole lot?
Stat. Nah, I don't. I'd probably say I use it 2 to 3 times a week.
Okay.
So, yeah, not too much. Wiener.
I would
probably about the same.
If I was a nurse, I would use stat constantly. I'd be like, "I'm going to the lunchroom, stat," and then I would just go. But yeah, and yeah, I think that's a really good point too. And I will say it because I know that Scrubs is probably nothing like real life. I mean, maybe like to some extent, but I don't know if you watch that show, but I loved Carla, because Carla was the nurse, but she was like the boss bitch. She was like, and everyone was, yeah. And that's, I mean, and really that's kind of what I think of with the nurses, like I definitely get you've got a protocol and stuff like that, but like if you're someone who's I would imagine a lot of the time, you know, do the doctors ever come to you and be like, what do you think? Or are they pretty much just like, this is what what's that? I guess what's that dynamic like? Like, do you see
Oh
yourself
yeah.
as an equal, or is it, because like you said on Grey's Anatomy and stuff like that, they're always getting chewed out, but I would imagine it's much more of a partnership than it is like, go do this for me.
Right. You're exactly right. I have only worked in one hospital my entire career, so I absolutely love the doctors I work with. In fact, might be like on the borderline stalker side of the doctors I work with, just because I love them so much. And I do think of them, some of them as my friends, but I still, do elevate them in the sense of you deserve authority and respect. And that's just me being like a Southern girl, that I'm definitely not going to call, a doctor by their first name ever, unless maybe they're 5 years younger than me and I gave birth to them. Other than that, I'm probably just going to still call them Dr. So-and-so. But I do consider some of the doctors I work with friends, and I definitely joke around with them a lot. And I've worked really hard to get to know them on a personal level. So they still do call the shots, but they ask for our opinions and say, well, what do you think? Or my one thing that always blows me away when we are coding somebody and towards the end of the code, when interventions aren't working, and almost always a doctor will say, does anyone have any other ideas? And that just means like, hey, we're all here for the same goal. We're all trying to help this person. My opinion is not any better than yours. Throw them on out there. So I do think like, it is a mix of, respect and authority versus we're all here for a common goal. And my opinion is still validated.
I think that's awesome because, because I guess I didn't really think about it before, but when you're kind of talking about like the way that you study going into the profession, with the doctors being very much like medicine based and things like that, and the nurses having, yes, you're learning about that, but you're also learning about like holistic human interaction, patient care, things like that. It seems like that would definitely be a good yin and yang to have in that situation, where hey, maybe I know a lot about medicine, but like you've spent every day for weeks with this person, so like, do you have any ideas, or what have you noticed, anything like that? Let me ask you this: do you have, because I definitely, for people's privacy and stuff like that, like I like to, I mean, unless you're comfortable with talking about the hospital that you work for, like naming the hospital that you work for, I would never want to be like, hey, so how are things here, but like, have you had a patient or anyone that kind of like sticks out as like, this has been my favorite, or like somebody who stands out, or somebody that you don't think like you'll ever forget? Has there been, anybody who kind of sticks with you like that?
Yeah. Well, for privacy purposes, I won't, call out too many details on individuals, but I get like repeat patients all the time. And so just a couple of weeks ago, I was just passing through a unit. I wasn't even taking care of this person. And I was like, I know your face. And this guy was like, I've never been a patient here. I was like, no, we've met before. And a couple hours later, his wife came. I said, I took care of you. You were in room 4. It was about 6 months ago. And, the family just like, you remember? So I am like a creeper in the sense of, my patients do stick with me, and I try really hard to not forget people. And I do, pray for my patients. When I leave at work, I'm like, I'll be praying for you. And I really do try very hard to, remember Mr. Smith and Mr. Connor and Miss Jones. I try so hard, just because, again, they are individual. But one of my favorite patients ever was about a year and a half ago. This lady was supposed to have surgery for this mass in her belly, and she was going to end up with an ostomy. She just really was not, she didn't want to. She was afraid. She didn't know what the rest of her life would look like in that situation. And she was just torn to pieces. And this wasn't even my own floor. I'd just gotten floated to the surgical floor. And so I knew she was kind of struggling with this at the beginning of the day. tried to make small talk, and I was like, oh, well, where do you live? She said, oh, I live in Laverne. And so I was like, oh, me too. And she didn't reply. So I was like, okay, like she's still not in the mood. That's fine. And the next time I came back, I was like, so whereabout in Laverne do you live? And she told me the street. And I was like, oh, that's cool. My parents grew up, but that's the street that I grew up on when I was born. She's like, oh, cool. Well, what are your parents' names? And when I told her, she was actually my mom who had passed away. She was her coworker. And she just burst into tears. Yeah, she's like, oh my gosh, we were best friends. We worked in the same cubicle, and that was 25 years ago now. So she was very emotional, but that bond, she had pulled up pictures on her phone from them being, 20-year-olds in the, cubicle just goofing off. And I had pulled up pictures of my sister and my dad because she remembered us, but that created a bond so that, what she was struggling with currently, I was able to just talk to her and be like, listen, it's totally your decision, but, I don't think you're ready to die. You're very young, and you don't want this one thing to, take over the rest of your life when we have a solution. So we actually, battled it together for a couple of days, and she ended up having the surgery and making a great recovery. And we send each other notes and flowers in the mail because we have each other's addresses. So definitely meeting her was like, oh my gosh, this, it definitely was in like a burnout period. And it definitely solidified, this is why I'm here, to help people make these tough choices, to create relationships with random strangers that, the duration of our relationship lasted 2 or 3 days, but, we'll always remember each other, and we help make impacts on each other's lives during that moment.
And I think that's absolutely awesome. And I'm not, I've said this before, but I'm not someone who is very like, oh yeah, I'm not a big religion guy. Mm-hmm. However, I do think that sometimes the universe sends you reminders, you know what I mean? And that's what that sounds like to me, is that, if you're, burnt out, like, I think about it with the kid, is like, there are some days where she's just screaming and like fussy, and it doesn't matter what I do, she just wants to like give me attitude. But then somewhere in that day, she will do, like, she'll say a new word, or like she'll look at you and give you this smile and this wave, or do something you haven't seen before, and you're like, oh, like that's why,
right?
That makes it worth it, because no matter how much you push me to my limit, like you're an amazing human being that I get to see like grow in front of me, you know what I mean? And it sounds like that's kind of that same situation where, if you're burnt out and then you just happen to be with somebody who has, knew your mom and knew your mom for a very long time. And like, let me ask you this, because, with her passing when you were as young as you were, like, was it cool for you to kind of like hear those stories from someone who like knew her, that like, because I can just imagine if it was me, I'd be like, oh, like, tell me all the stories that you have. Like, so like, was there any of that, or were you more so like trying to focus on her? Or?
Oh, no, definitely for a second I had like, tears in my eyes, and I pushed all the blankets off of her bed and moved her feet over and just snuggled up next to her. And we just chit-chatted. And I'm sure my coworkers thought I was in just, some crazy situation in that room because I didn't come out for an hour. But it was really cool just to be like, oh, blast from the past. Please tell me everything. I was a little kid. I was 4 years old when my mom died. So it's really nice just for any of those nuggets. I was just grabbing onto them, and I might have made that moment about myself instead of about her. But in the long run, like, again, it just created this bond between us that I was able to help her. She was able to help me. And that was really cool.
Yeah, well, and, I know you said like you made it about yourself, but I'm like, part of me wonders too, is if like by her being able to give you that, like, especially when you're looking at someone who, because it sounds like in that case, like you said, like, hey, like, I don't think you're ready to die. Like, I could very much see that as much as you got from it, and, you may think it was about you, I could very much see her being like, oh, like I do have something, there is something to worth, like, look, just by telling, this nurse stories, like, I've been able to give her this. So it seems like that's very much like just as much as, you pushing for her, like there was something for her to take out of that as well. I think that's beautiful. I mean, I think stories like that and when things like that happen, especially, with everything that's going on right now, I mean, like those are the things that need to be celebrated. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Because
yeah.
there's just so much like scary stuff and crazy things going on that, like, when you get that little glimpse of like, okay, this is a good thing. Like it's good for everybody. I mean, at least that's, how I'm feeling. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but like right now it's just like, anything that you can get that kind of puts a smile on your face, like just keep looking for those things, because it's freaking crazy out there right now.
Yeah,
How
it is
long
definitely.
ago was this? Was this like
I
a couple of years ago
feel
or
like
fairly recent, or?
it was about a year and a half ago. So not too long ago.
Okay. And that's
Yeah.
nice that you still keep in contact with her.
Yeah, she's so sweet.
That's awesome. Yeah, it was I mean, it's not anywhere like near on the same level, but I was at Dollar General grabbing something, and I'm pretty tight with the lady at the manager at Dollar General.
Oh yeah.
She because we live not far from it, so anytime I need something quick, I run in there. And this was like a week and a half ago, and so I came in. She's like, Psst. She was like, "You need Lysol wipes." I was like, "Hey, pusher man," like, or not Lysol
Yeah.
wipes. She had the disinfectant spray. She was like,
Okay.
you need some of this? She's like, "I got a box, but I've been saving it for the people that I know and stuff like that." And I was like, "Yeah, I'll take 2 of them." And so we were in line, and in front of me was another lady, I guess, that was in there all the time. And she asked her, she was like, "Hey, do you need disinfectant spray?" And this lady like started tearing up. She was like, I barely have enough money to pay for what I have in my cart right now. She was an older lady, like she had like an arm brace on, and she was like parked in the handicap. I don't know what her story was, but she was like, can you hold it for me and I'll come back? And I was just like, just put it on my bill, let her take it. And it was like a $4 thing of Lysol spray or whatever, so it's not like the end of the world. But she was just like, you could tell that simple thing kind of like made her whole day. And she was like, "I'd give you a hug if I could." And I was like, "Don't, like, please don't touch me."
Please don't touch me.
Like 6 feet, please. But I think just those are the kind of things right now that I think like people need to do for each other. You know what I mean? And so I don't know. I've been looking for. I've been really looking for like positive things. So I really like that story. It hit me. Like, I think that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, you
And
made a positive story in somebody's day too.
well, I'm, like even shout out to Christy Lee. She knew your mom, and she sent us a picture
Yeah.
of one. She was like, "Who does this look like?" And I was like, "Is that Morgan?" And she was like, "Nope, real close." She was like, "This is her mama back in the day." And I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, they look so much alike." It was crazy. I think
Yeah.
Kara sent it to you. But just I don't know. It was just cool just to kind of be like, "Hey, like check this out." You know what I mean? Because I haven't lost someone like that, but I can imagine that in that moment, or in your, not that moment, but like throughout your life, like it's just really important to like hold on to as much of it as you can. So I'm really glad that you got that.
Yeah.
So I did want to ask you, because with you being a nurse and with everything that, or a nurse practitioner, BC, QRS, TUV.
TUV.
I would
Yep,
literally,
exactly.
I would have to pull it up and read it because it's just so much. But I definitely like, I can't have you on and not talk about it. So like, how are you dealing right now with everything? Like, what is your stress level like? Or, does it seem to be more like business as usual? Like what is going on for you right now with coronavirus and everything? Like what are your days like?
Yeah. Well, it's just weird. And I think a lot of people in Nashville would say the same. We're not getting heavily hit right now like other places are, like Detroit and New York and LA. They're getting hit really hard and really heavy right now. In places like Nashville, we're just on the brink. We're on our toes because the tipping point is coming, and we know it is. The question is, like, are we ready for it? So the latest numbers are saying that social distancing is working, but that doesn't mean we can stop, because it is working and it's being effective. So everyone just keep doing what you're doing, and fewer lives will be lost. But all hospitals are not doing elective stuff. So you're not going to get your knee replacement right now. You're not going to get your boob job. You're not going to, do the things that you kind of have a choice in the matter of. We're pretty much only doing cancer surgeries or emergencies. And that's just one, to keep fewer people out of the hospital, because, I'd hate for you to go and get, your tummy tucked and then end up on a ventilator with COVID-19 when we could have avoided that in the first place. But two, to keep more beds available for when that peak season happens, whenever it does happen. So it is strange in the sense that, we're not working with patients who have had surgery, who are, usually flooding the hospitals. So that's like strange in that sense, but also like just this week, our COVID population has, tripled in my hospital personally. So, we are hunkering down and just getting ready for it. We have areas in our hospital that are COVID only to keep non-COVID people and COVID people separated so we can reduce spreading. But the COVID units are growing, and we have more areas reserved off for COVID-19. So it is strange to, one, see that it's slower in some areas, but when you walk over to the COVID side, it's very cautious, where we legitimately, the CDC has had us hire someone that legit just sits there and watches people put their personal protective equipment on to make sure that they're doing it correctly, so that, they're not endangering themselves. And then, of course, everyone's heard about the PPE shortage. We're not short here in Nashville per se, but it's tight, and we're also reserving some PPE for when it does hit. So we're definitely using reusable things. Instead of, 2 months ago, we were disposing masks and gowns like no tomorrow. And, now we're definitely reusing things and sterilizing things, and definitely being stewards of our resources very wisely. So it's strange. And of course, people are scared. My coworkers, some of them have bravely worked in the COVID-19 units for, days and weeks on end now, and they're fine with it. And other people are terrified, and rightly so, because they live with, elderly family members or new kids. So, it is scary. And we're, seeing people get sicker and sicker as time goes on, and the virus is spreading. So again, it's weird. I don't know another way to describe it except, wow, like, who knew when I graduated from nursing school that I would be dealing with pandemic situation in America in 2020?
Now, because I know, and I'm right there with you. Me personally, I've been trying to stick to experts as opposed to, like, there's this guy, oh my God, his name is Dr. Naputi, and he is I don't know if you've seen his videos on Facebook,
Yes.
but he is a holistic chiropractor and believes that most things don't need to be cured, which I definitely agree. There's a lot of people taking medicine out there for stuff that they shouldn't, but this dude runs his own wellness center, and I looked him up, and he's got a 2.5 star rating on the Better Business Bureau. This was like well before any of his videos like started coming out, where people are calling him a snake oil salesman, and he's just ripping off elderly people and stuff like that. And everyone right now is putting out his videos. Not only that, they're putting out his videos under like a different doctor name because they don't realize who it actually is. But he's saying, all you need to do is drink seltzer water and take zinc, and this is all fake news, and it's not that scary, and you're going to be fine. Just, drink your seltzer water, take your zinc. Let me ask you, because you are someone, like I said, like, I look at you as Kara, Kara, she's still going in every day. For folks listening, I think I've talked about this before, but she works with people who are trying to get off drugs. You know what I mean? And that's not something that you can be like, okay, we'll go try to do that from home. I mean, I know you've been there. You've led knitting classes there, I believe. That might have been the place before, I think.
Yeah, I think that was their first job.
But that's not, that these are people that live there. They're still getting new patients. And when new patients come in, like, you don't know who they've been out, so like, let me ask you this, like, with what you do and with what you're doing every day, in your opinion, do you think this is something that should be, taken as seriously as we are taking it? Because when I look at it and I see like all the fake news stuff, and it's not that, it kind of like infuriates me. But I don't work in that world. You know what I mean? I'm not doing what you're doing every day and coming home and having to go through what you go through. So like, in your opinion, do you think any of this is blown out of proportion, or do you think like we're spot on right now?
Well, and you'll definitely see this geographically. The hot spots are, the coast. So New York, LA, Detroit is a big international hotspot. Those people are seeing the effects of this. And like, if you could just talk to a nurse that lives in Manhattan right now, you would just hear how wild things are. But if you live more inland, or, especially if in Nashville, there are people that we are just, waiting for the shoe to drop. So it doesn't feel as crazy, but it's certainly, if you just saw a patient who did have COVID-19, especially, those who are immunocompromised or a little bit old or a little bit younger, this thing moves fast and it's very destructive. And the only thing we really know about COVID-19 is that we don't know much at all. So I think it really even took me, we traveled to LA at the beginning of March. It's currently April 12th.
Yep.
So
Easter Sunday, we're hanging out.
Yep. So. Easter Sunday. Shout out to the homie.
He is risen. And then was like, I'm out of here. There's too much coronavirus.
Exactly.
I'm out. Peace.
So we were traveling to LA a month ago, and my husband, he kind of mentioned that maybe I was taking this a little over the top because I was hand sanitizing and wiping our trays down on the plane. But that's when, it was still more just international. It hadn't really hit here yet. And even then I was like, I might be being overly cautious, but I'd rather be overly cautious than not. And flash forward to 1 month later, the entire nation is shut down. And so I really do think, like, if you saw someone that was as sick as COVID can make you, then you would realize, like, this is not something to be playing around with. Even my parents are still very skeptical about it. And they're like, well, maybe Corona didn't kill them, that they had some underlying thing. Sure, but welcome to America, where we're all overweight and we all have something else going on. So, maybe they did have something else going on, but Corona definitely exacerbated it and took years and years off of individuals' lives that otherwise, they could have probably managed for another decade or two.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you because, Lord knows I am not a small man by any means. I think I'm like a lot of other Americans where, I like fast food and I'm not as healthy as I should be. And I think, that's something that we deal with as a country in general. And when you look at some place like China, where, yes, in China it was mostly taking out like senior citizens. I know from what I've heard, a large population of the older males passed away because they smoke cigarettes. So they're older, they smoke cigarettes, where women in China typically don't. So like older men were actually passing away at a higher rate than older women. But, that was a big thing, was like China does not have the like obesity and like weight issue that we have here in the United States. So like, what's that going to look like? What effect is that going to have on your lungs? Things like that. I know that there was I guess the way that the way that I've thought about it, because, in response to kind of like that, well, maybe it was something else and then coronavirus did them in. Like if somebody has depression and then they shoot themselves in the face, you don't say, well, that person died of depression. You say,
Yeah.
that person died because they shot themselves in the face. The
Right.
depression led to that, but the cause of death was, the gunshot. And I feel like that is very kind of where we're at right now, where, I'm somebody, I grew up with asthma. I smoked cigarettes. You know what I mean? If I got corona and it killed me, the corona still killed me. It's just that the asthma and the cigarette smoking made it easier for it to do it,
Exactly.
It's just, I don't know. It's crazy. And I know there was a 21-year-old girl from Nashville. I don't know if you saw this, but she was kind of talking about like, she was on Twitter and all her social media being like, this is all like a big hoax. And it's just a, drum up news. And I'm going to go out and I'm going to see my friends and everything like that. And like 2 weeks later, she was like, well, I got COVID-19 and feels like there's a 300-pound man sitting on my chest and I'm coughing so hard that I'm spitting up blood and I can't move. Like I can't walk without getting out of breath. So it scares me that this might be something that like people won't fully understand the scope of. There's some folks out there who won't understand it unless they get it. And I will say, I think I was like Zach, where before it hit here, I was like, it's no big deal. Give me a hug. Like, it's good to see you. Like, you'll probably hear about somebody getting it, but like you want, like the odds of you getting it are going to be, very low. And,
Right.
and then
That could never happen to me. Right.
Right. And being from Michigan, and my whole family living up there, like it accelerated very quickly. And then it seems like Nashville is, it seems to be like a week or two behind what's going on there. Someone who lives in my mom's condo complex got it. And
Mm-hmm.
they slid them a note on their door, let them know. But the day before they got the note, EMS showed up, and she said the best way to describe it was that they were, if you've seen ET at the end, where all the like the government agencies are, and they're all in like those crazy hazmat
Yeah.
suits. Like that was like the firefighters. That was everyone was dressed like that. So it's just I don't know. It's I mean, I definitely was one of those folks who was like, I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. But when things seem to kind of tick, I think like you have to take it seriously. You know what I mean? Like, so do you think, from what you do and seeing people, like, are we doing do you think we're doing the best thing that we can as far as staying home, social distancing, things like that? I mean, does that, in your opinion, and I know, you're not like a COVID expert, but you definitely are someone who's dealing with it in a way every day. I mean, would you, let's say it was Morgan's government, would you do anything differently? Do you think we're handling it well? What would President Bryant say? First woman president. What would she say?
Well, I do think that there are some states that are doing well. There are some states that have already said, no more school for the rest of the school year. And then some states like Tennessee is saying, well, we'll just take it day by day. But the numbers are showing that social distancing is working. Again, lives will be lost if we don't keep doing this. It is horribly terrifying and it is detrimental to the economy. And so I'm sympathizing with business owners and people who are out of jobs, because that is absolutely terrifying. And lives are changing dramatically, and it could, people could still be dying on that sense of, and where's our money coming from? And I'm not a horribly political person, so there is magical surplus stipends coming to us eventually, but I haven't seen my money yet, so I'm not banking on that. But some families, they do need that money to make ends meet, so I do acknowledge that and feel badly for them. But I do think that, staying at home, staying away from people, the people that I've seen, that even a lot of my coworkers have it, but I've noticed that we haven't gotten it from our patients. We've gotten it from each other. A couple of girls went off on a girl trip together at the end of February, and 3 of those 4 girls got it. And it's like, well, they didn't get it from patient so-and-so. They got it because they were hanging out with themselves. And it is also scary in the sense that this virus has a strange dormancy period, up to, 14 to 17 days is what we're thinking it does. So, I personally could have, contracted the virus and I'm carrying it around, but I'm not going to be symptomatic until 2 weeks from now. That's almost the 1st of May. And how many people am I seeing in those 2 weeks where I'm carrying it and dropping it off with my grandma, and I'm dropping it off, at the cashier at the grocery store. So I do think that, again, we just don't know so much about this, and it is so detrimental. And then to the effect of people saying, oh, it's really not that serious. I know someone that had it and they really didn't feel that bad and they're back to work in 2 weeks. But this virus looks so different depending on who gets it. And some people will, only feel like they got a bad flu, and some people will die. But you don't know what kind of person you're going to be when you get it until you get it. And that's just something that I wouldn't want anybody to risk is, are you going to have a stuffy nose, or are you going to have a funeral in 2 weeks? Do you really want to play that kind of roulette?
Yeah, that you want to have a funeral that like your family can't come, and
right. You're going to die without your family at the hospital because hospitals can't have visitors. It's terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen all the videos of I'm a huge fan of The Office. I think we share that passion.
Yes.
John Krasinski, who played Jim, he has new Netflix, a new YouTube show that he's doing, Some Good News, and it's just
if you haven't
all
seen
positive.
it, please go watch it, guys.
Oh my god,
so good.
I'll put the link in the show description if people haven't seen it. I have nothing to do with that show. I'm not affiliated in any way, but it is. I mean, if you need to see something, especially right now, to kind of get that good news. But there's that man who his wife has dementias in the nursing home, and he's outside the window just singing to her so she doesn't forget who he is. You know what I mean? It's like it's absolutely crazy times. And I think you're right. I mean, the scary thing for me is that you've got folks like Idris Elba or Tom Hanks, right? Idris Elba, another Office reference, Charles Minor, right?
Yes.
But they both get it, feel a little down. They're good to go in a couple of weeks. Then there's a like 30-year-old Olympic swimmer in South Africa, like gold medalist, who he's like, I can't walk 3 steps. And like this dude's like perfect, like human specimen. He like works out,
exactly.
he swims, great lungs, and he's like, I don't know if I'm ever going to be the same again. So it doesn't affect every person the same way. And the fact that you can have it for 2 weeks before you get sick and just, kind of walk around. Like, I don't know anything. I mean, again, I'm not a nurse or, haven't done any medical studies, but I'm not familiar with anything else like that where you're like, oh yeah, I can have this thing that could potentially kill a bunch of people and not even know it until, 2 weeks later, I don't know. It's just, it's crazy. And like I said, I can't imagine, because again, for me, I'm not wired for what you do. I'd be at work if I was going to the hospitals. Like Millie had a fever, and we we thought it was just from teething, but she wasn't coughing, she wasn't like wheezing, no runny nose, nothing, just the fever. So we called the doctor, and the doctor was like, nope, don't bring her in, give her Tylenol, like. And if she starts coughing or something else, let us know, and then you can bring her in. But like, don't bring her in right now. Like, we'd rather, just control the fever. Probably teething, could be like a small infection or something, but let it work itself out. And so that's crazy to me, to be like, there's something wrong with your kid, but we're going to basically say, hey, is it worth it right now for you to bring them in? And luckily our doctor's office, they've got 2 locations. So one is set for just like well visits. So, if you just need to you're doing your checkup or whatever, no symptoms, you can go there. But if you're running a fever, you're sick, you have to go to like their this is where everyone who has any symptoms of anything goes. So he was basically like, hey, if you got to bring her in, this is where she's going to go. So just give her Tylenol and let's try to, stop her from getting there. So, I mean, like, what do you have to do for you? Like, is it for you? Is it just like, okay, this is how it is and I'm going to work? Or like, I mean, I would have like a pep talk every morning. I'd be in the mirror like, you got to do this. Like, this is, people depend on you and this is how you pay for your house, and stop whining, get your pants on and go. Like, is there anything that you need to do to prep yourself to go, or is it just kind of ingrained in you, like, this is what I do, this is my calling, like, get in the car, go?
Yeah, I think I'm more on the second hand of that, is just like, this is my job, this is what I love to do. And when I did sign up to be a nurse, it's kind of like a marriage where I was like, I'm here for the good and the bad times. This is a bad time, but if half of us don't show up, then that's going to be a really big deal. Also, again, like, my coworkers are getting sick, so I'm having to, fill in holes. But on the offhand side of that is, if and when I do get sick, I would really love for someone to, be my hands and feet as well, just so that, people are getting taken care of.
Now, do you and I'm just like, again, trying to put myself in the mindset, but like, with what you do, is it just like, because I've heard a lot of, you see people who work in hospitals, on social media, in interviews in the news, your EMT, stuff like that. A lot of them, from what I've heard, is like, we're just waiting, like, we're going to get it. And, it's just, kind of like a hazard of the job. Like, is that kind of the mindset that you have? Are you trying to, like, do you try to talk yourself out of it? Or are you like, hey, like, is there like a certain level of acceptance that somebody in your position may have when it comes to contracting it that maybe like a normal person wouldn't have? Or is it, or are you still, is the level of fear still the same, I guess?
Well, I'm kind of like on the opposite end of the spectrum of, my sisters are hypochondriacs and my friends are texting me all the time. What do you think this? Da, da, da. And I just always err on the side of like, are you breathing? Are you bleeding? If everything's fine, I would just let it wait out. And so, I really try not to live in fear in that regard, only because I have so much anxiety about every other aspect of my life. But, I think that, if you have to be smart at work, but I've been told, I'm not sure if I believe this philosophy yet, but that nurses are the safest because we, do know what to do. We're washing our hands even more than the people who think that they're washing their hands 1,000 times. And if you are being smart, at least in Nashville, everyone is wearing a mask at all times. And so the dangerous parts are when you take that mask off and you eat with all your girlfriends at lunch, and this is your 30-minute respite. Maybe one of your girlfriends has it, and now all of you have it. So we just had to send like 45 nurses on furlough for 2 weeks because 5 nurses got it, but they took their masks off for lunch, or they were way too close giving report. So although all 45 of them aren't sick, we were like, you have the possibility of getting sick, please stay at home and let's stop the spread where it's at right now. So, it is spreading within my little community, but I'm still just trying to be smart about it. I am still self-monitoring, so I personally take my temperature every morning and every evening, and, I'm still feeling great. And the second that I don't feel great, I will certainly look more into that so that, maybe I do infect my husband, but I don't infect, dozens of people instead.
I've been taking my temperature every day too. And Kara's gotten really mad because I do it rectally, and it's like the community thermometer. So she's like, there's other ways to take your temperature. I'm like, this way feels the best.
It feels so right.
Right. And then when the oven's done, it's like beep beep, and I just take the cookies out. So I did want to ask you this because I've also, and I thought you would be a really good person to ask, because I've seen, so there's some things out there that just infuriate me. I've seen like abortion has killed X amount of people, like alcoholism has killed this amount of people, the coronavirus has only killed like this amount of people. And first of all, I think it's like definitely a false comparison, right? Like if like abortion is an elective thing, right? Car crashes, you can elect to wear your seatbelt, things like that. Like this is, this is something that this is something that like you don't choose to get, right? It's not based off of any choice. So I think that those are definitely false comparisons. But the one that I have a hard time with, and I was wondering what you thought about, is when we look at like the number of deaths from just like the flu, right? Because from what I understand, the flu can be deadly, like more deadly or less deadly depending on like what strain is prominent in the season.
Mm-hmm.
So like what do you think of that compare? Because I hear that a lot, like the flu is killing more people than, and we're, we don't stay indoors for the flu and blah 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 blah. Like, and you may not have an opinion on this, but I just figured if there was somebody to ask, you would probably be like the best source. But like what are your thoughts behind something like that? Like, do you see a difference with it? Or
Well, and again, I'm not an expert at all, and I don't know the numbers, but
you're
you just have
not?
to keep. No, I'm not just in the flu, but maybe everything else. Definitely rectal temperature taking. I am an expert in.
I'll have to show you how I do it later. You have to tell me if I'm doing it right.
Yeah, tips and tricks. So I don't have those numbers like memorized or anything, but you do have to keep in mind that COVID-19 has caused this many deaths in 6 weeks, 8 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
A large amount of deaths in a small amount of time. And you also have to consider how infectious this is. And, there are a couple of graphs out there. One person can affect 3 people. And if those 3 people infect more 3 people, 10 times over, you've infected thousands of people. And so, it's just like a movie from the 90s, Outbreak, where, I think we all watched that when Ebola was a big thing a few years ago.
It's right now, too.
Yeah.
If you want to revisit that terrifying film.
It is terrifying, but, and in the sense of, it's not to that extreme, but it's so infectious. So people are dying, in Europe, people, and this might bring solace to some people, but I don't think it should. But, so many Italians were infected because they live in small communities and with lots of generations in one household. So, that's why so many people passed away. But, now that it's making it to America, it's still staying in metropolitan areas where people live in closer spaces. And it is working its way outward. So I don't know. It makes me sad that people are discounting how serious this is, only because do you want to be on the wrong side of your theory? Do you want to not take it seriously? And then maybe you don't, get infected, but someone that you love does. And, I think we're going to be seeing lifelong effects to this, because what COVID-19 does is it gets in your lungs and creates fibrosis, or like stiffening and scarring. So your lungs can't fully expand. And so you can't take that big, deep breath. And that's just not right now. But we think it's going to be, a lifelong issue. So if you get it when you're 20, 30, 40 years old, you're going to not be able to breathe for the rest of your life. And I feel like that is just terrifying enough. Like, we breathe thousands of times a day, and you want to make that hard every single day for the rest of your life? Because I certainly don't.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point too, because I think that's something else that a lot of people aren't thinking about right now is, like, I'm sure you saw the spring break kids videos where they're like,
Yeah.
I don't think it's really that big of a weird. I'm 21. I'm here to party, baby. You know what I mean? And it's like, yeah, you might get it when you're 21, and you may recover from it now, but you don't know what the long term. It's like someone who gets into a car crash. Like, like you get into a car crash, you break your leg, they put a cast on it, you're walking fine 3 months later. But 10 years down the line, when it rains and your knee starts to hurt super bad, because like you don't know what those long-term effects are going to be. And so why not just, take the precaution to be safe? And I mean, I know somebody that, I'm friends with in real life and friends with on Facebook, and, they had posted that Dr. Naputi guy. And I just hate that man. I don't
Yes.
hate anybody, but I strongly dislike him. But I was like, hey, I wouldn't like come hug your grandma right now. I wouldn't come hug your mom or dad, because like I care about them. I care about you, because if I hug you and they get it, and I have, and I don't know if you feel the same way or not. You may feel completely different, but those, the people that are like, I'm not going to live my life in fear, and I'm, like, I'm not saying live your life in fear, but I'm saying like live your life responsibly right now.
Right.
Like this isn't,
exactly.
because if we do it right now, a year, 6 months from now, 7 months from now, hopefully we'll be able to like I can't wait to give you and Zach a hug. You know what I mean? I can't wait to go, like it's killing my mom, because my mom's a paraprofessional. So she, works in the school district in Michigan, and they're closed to the end of the year. She works, when she's not at the school, she works part-time at a bowling alley. They're closed. So she's like, this is a time that I should be able to hop on a plane and come down and spend like 2-3 weeks with you guys and see my granddaughter. And, it's like, if we do what we should be doing now, hopefully, a few months down the line, like we'll be able to do that. But the more that people are just kind of out and ignoring things and acting like it's not a big deal, it's like, it just feels like it's going to go on and go on and go on and go on until we have some kind of like shot, vaccine, or cure, So I did want to ask you this, because the other thing I've seen a lot of criticism about is people are like, especially in Michigan right now, because the governor there, Governor Whitmer, she has stopped landscaping crews from working, because, and someone who's done landscaping before, you meet at a lot with like 5-6 dudes, you get into a truck, you go pick up, whatever supplies that you need, you stop and get gas, you go out for your lunch break, come back, you're going from house to house to house to house, things like that. So she's basically said like, hey, no, we're closing down landscaping right now, but she's keeping liquor stores open. And I know in Tennessee, liquor stores are considered an essential business as well. And I wanted you to speak to this, because I don't think a lot of people fully understand. So as a nurse, what happens if someone is an alcoholic and they like are physically dependent on alcohol and then they don't have it? If they come into you, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, honestly, I didn't even think about it from that perspective, because I had considered, well, Tennessee especially was very strict with its liquor and alcohol practices until just a few years ago when we started loosening up. So I was really curious why liquor stores were still open, and you definitely opened my eyes to that. But when someone who is used to drinking large quantities of alcohol on a daily or weekly basis just suddenly stops, they go through what we call the DTs. And, that just means that they're withdrawing from alcohol. And it can certainly, like, people can actually die from alcohol withdrawal. But, first, people are agitated and sweaty, and, sometimes they can be aggressive. And that turns into just simply speaking, it's called metabolic encephalopathy, which just means that your brain there's swelling on your brain and you're not thinking correctly. And if that swelling is in a certain place, you're also not breathing correctly. And you could stop breathing. Again, just, it's kind of the worst. I hate seeing people. It's very similar to, I'm sure people have seen videos of people detoxing off of, opiates, like a heroin addict is detoxing off of that, and how, it is painful, it is scary, it's just awful to watch, but also, it could be lethal and people could die. So it is definitely something to consider that you just brought to my mind, that I didn't even think about that side of it.
Well, I wanted to ask you too. So like right now, because I know like from what I understand too, like, especially like in Detroit, a lot of what like emergency rooms and things like that see is like, the homeless population, stuff like that, who like that's what they're going through. Like they couldn't make the, $6 to buy a case of beer, or, whatever, like couple 40s or whatever. How often do you see that, or people coming in, homeless or not? Like how often do you see that coming into your hospital? Is that a pretty like normal thing? I mean, do you see it like quite a bit? Is it here and there? Because from what I understand, it's like if we were to shut down all liquor sales, beer sales, all of those people who are alcoholics to that point, they would all be in the emergency room because they were going through that. And then you've got that flood of people, that's resources being taken away from what actually where those resources should be going. So I didn't know if that's something that you see, pretty commonly now, or if you could see it being the same way. Like, I mean, do you imagine that there would just be a ton of people at the hospital every day for that?
Yeah, we definitely do see alcohol withdrawal on a daily basis. Like you said, homeless or not, just regular people. I don't think we realize how much liquor affects our lives, and people who are really dependent on it. Just guys coming in for a regular old knee replacement surgery in the hospital, you're not allowed to drink your, 2-3 glasses of whiskey a night or whatever you do. And so, when people tell me how much alcohol they drink on a daily basis, sometimes I'm astounded, because some people do drink, a handle a day. And so when that happens and you go, usually it's about 2 to 3 day mark, that's when you start to have withdrawals. So just standard procedure, regular surgery, but you're without your alcohol, can elongate your hospitalization for a week or so, simply because of that. And so I do think that lives could be lost. We might get, an influx of patients in the hospital that are, causing a risk to themselves and taking up a bed that could be a COVID bed. So I do agree with you on that sense that we should probably keep them open, and keep things going in that sense. But alcohol definitely is so prevalent. And again, if people didn't have access to their alcohol, they might turn to something else to kind of feed that. And so we don't want to tumbleweed in that sense and have a snowball effect of getting into more trouble when we have a solution right now. I think liquor stores just should need to be safe, just like Lowe's is, and all those places that are open where they do have a distance, and everyone's being smart. Curbside pickup is always a good idea. And then once you receive whatever product you're getting, or if you're on the other side of it and you work at that kind of facility, that you're being smart. You're not touching your face. You're not, you're constantly washing your hands. You are keeping a good distance from people, in that sense.
I think that's great advice. I also think that someone needs to call Chick-fil-A and tell them, because I went to Chick-fil-A and they still got the people standing in the line, and they're like, "Hey, what can I get you?" And I'm like, "You can get back about 3 feet because you were right up in my window."
Get your mobile orders out for whatever has a mobile order.
Yeah, and then the other thing I noticed too is that they're like, the one lady finished her shift while I was in line. The other lady came out. She just handed her the iPad, and she was like, "Okay, go ahead." And it's like, disinfect that thing, and like, please don't come up to my window and ask me what I want. Like, shout it from the other side of the parking lot.
We're all gonna learn sign language by the end of this.
Not me. I don't have the cognitive ability. It would just be middle fingers and thumbs up. That's the only two and peace sign. Those are the only ones I need to. That's all I need to. Hey man, it's cool. We don't need to argue. Peace, peace. So, I do really appreciate you being here. Like I said, like I know that it's a scary time for everybody right now, and I just think we are extremely lucky to have people that are wired like you. I mean, and again, you may disagree with me, or, you may not take these compliments, but that's you. That's not me. But you know, you are wired with a certain kind of bravery that a lot of people don't have. And I think that it's because of people like you that we're in our situation is much more fortunate than it could be. So I just, you know, I wanted to say thank you for doing what you do every single day. Thank you for being my friend. Thank you for always having the biggest heart and open arms to me from the first day that we met. You know, like I said, I really do think that you are a superhero. You know, I'd like, you know, Batman isn't afraid to jump off that building to get the bad guy, right? And you're not afraid to get into your car and go to work every day knowing what could be there. So I just want you to know that on behalf of myself, anybody listening to the show, I mean, just a very big, genuine, heartfelt thank you for you and everyone that you work with. You know, give them air high fives. I would say go and give them all a hug. Don't do that. Give them the air high fives and
yeah,
let
elbows.
let them know that we support them. And yeah, like I said, I just want to say thank you so much. The last thing that I wanted to ask you, and I think that I'm going to start making this next week, we're actually having a special show dedicated only to this, with everybody being home. But what have you been watching, just to kind of go out on a positive note?
Oh yeah.
What have you been streaming? Have you found any like hidden gems? If you had to make a recommendation right now for anybody at home, whether it's podcast, Netflix, whatever, what has been keeping Morgan and Zach, or just Morgan, you know, what's been keeping you guys sane since you've been home?
Oh yeah, good question. If you have Hulu, there's a great new show by Reese Witherspoon and Kerry Washington. It's called Little Fires Everywhere. There's also a novel that correlates with that by Celeste. Her last name is spelled NG, so I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that. But really recommend Little Fires Everywhere on Hulu. The Office is constantly playing. We did fall for the Tiger King.
What'd you think? What did you think?
Oh man, Carol Baskin definitely killed her husband for sure.
The best is roses are red, so why are you asking who killed their husband? That bitch Carol Baskin.
Carol Baskin.
There's a new episode out today.
Oh really?
Yeah, it's like you know how like The Bachelor does, like after the season they do like their reunion.
Yeah.
Joel McHale from Community is the quarantine host, and he does like webcam interviews with everyone who's not in jail right now to kind of be like, hey, what did you think of the show? So oh my god, if you haven't watched Tiger King, please do. And we haven't started Little Fires yet. I know that we're going to, because did you watch Big Little Lies on HBO?
I did, yes. Yeah.
We watched that, and Kara was really, really into it. And, you know, she likes Reese Witherspoon, and she was a big fan of Scandal too. So it looks like it's going to be, I have no doubt that I will have seen every episode of that in like the next 2 weeks. So
it's a really good story. I really recommend it.
Yeah, the other one, and I'm going to, I don't want to talk too much about it because I'm probably going to talk about it next week, but there is a documentary on Netflix called How to Fix a Drug Scandal. And it is the craziest story I have, like one of the craziest stories I've ever heard. And it came out right around the same time as Tiger King, and it kind of blows your mind the exact same way. So definitely check that out if you would like to, or anyone is listening would like to. So
yeah, I'll definitely be listening to that.
Yeah, but Morgan, thank you so much for being here. Let me ask you this before we go. You know, with you being a nurse, are there any like charities, special causes, anything like that you know you support or recommend, or anything that you'd like us to link up or anything like that? Like, I know a lot of people, you know, Feeding America and stuff like that, but I mean, I didn't know if there was something that was close to your heart or anything like that.
I've always been very passionate about donating blood. So if you're healthy and you're able to, I think that you should always donate blood. Not even just now, but especially now, and whenever you're able to. And, you know, I do have mixed feelings about the Red Cross because of some of their political views, but, you know, just as a nurse, seeing the effects of donated blood actually saving lives. And I'm really very passionate about organ donation as well, which comes with its, you know, political and spiritual relevancy as well. But I'm a really big fan of donate life. So
If you're able to, just take a couple minutes to look it up, or, if you really need to ask some questions, I'm more than welcome to answer some of those.
Yeah, and we'll put the link for the Red Cross blood donation, because I believe there's like a site that they can go to where it shows all of like the available banks in their area. So we'll put that in the show notes. Stick around for me after we get done, but I just want to say thank you again. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and again, just being a hero. I really do appreciate you. Just want to say thank you to everybody for tuning in. It's definitely happy to be back, and couldn't have thought of a better way to come back after hiatus. So we really appreciate you being here. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Everyone stay safe and wash those hands.
Wash them hands. All righty. Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you.